So yesterday, obviously, we had the president spoke from the Oval Office. He spoke from the Oval Office again this morning. Well, he talked to people again this morning during a joint presser with the Irish Prime Minister, which I just killed his accent. Like, it's just awful. I'm not even going to try. Not even. And but see, the thing is he's not going to get like outraged over that because they're Irish. They don't care. So he had a joint presser with him this morning, last night, speaking from the Oval Office, and he laid out the plan to blunt the economic impact of the coronavirus. And not just the economic impact of the coronavirus, but also some of the stuff that we talked a little bit about yesterday that we're going to dive deeper in today, which is the position that China holds as they have the monopoly for the lack of a better way to put it. I mean, virtual monopoly anyway, not entirely, but you get the idea. But they produce something like 92% of our antibiotic supply, and a significant percentage, way over 50%, of things like acetaminophen and ibuprofen and basic medicines that we rely on. And in their communist state newspaper, they were, this again, authored by Beijing, they were talking about, well, what would happen if we were just to stop giving this to the United States, stop trade, stop the export of these medicines. And it would basically, they said it would plummet us within the depths of hell. I'm too lazy to go back and actually read you Communist China's statement because it's Communist China and no one cares about any kind of accuracy. It's all about the fist, the iron fist coming down on the proletariat. Let's be honest. So that being said, the president had, and he just said outright, look, we're banning beginning Friday. What is it, midnight? Friday at midnight. Anybody coming in from Europe? Nope, you don't get to come in. Now, there is some nuance here. At first, he said that there was that it was also going to apply to cargo. Apparently, it's not going to apply to cargo. And everyone is so focused on the fact that, he said this and it was actually this. Maybe if you people in the media did your damn jobs and quit trying to fearmonger and politicize everything, and don't even sit here for 1 second and tell me that you don't, because I have an ungodly amount of examples to share with you today that if you tempt me, I will spend the next 3 hours browbeating you over the head with them. So don't. I have so many examples, they will not fit into this program. I'm happy to waste everybody's time doing that. That made me mad. I want some information. You want some information. And instead, we have twiddly-dink reporters out there like Jim Acosta. Well, he said Asian virus, and we all know that's racist. No one pays Jim Acosta for his appearance, much less his intelligence. Just repeat the facts that other people say to you. That's all you have to do. That is literally your only job. You just repeat things that people tell you. How hard is that to mess up? Golly. That's like driving a car into a giant yellow parking pole that you see. He's focusing on identity politics when he should be focusing on saving lives and how to best contain this whole thing, right? I am, and you can see a smug face if you're watching Channel 248 Pluto TV via the first, which we, by the way, show streams all 3 hours there, Facebook and YouTube. I could not believe that I saw that clip, and I honestly thought that it was, I really honestly thought that it was a little, that the description was overwrought. You know what I mean? I thought, they're exaggerating. There's no way. Oh my gosh. When I listen, I'm like, there's no way. There's no way somebody's going to do that. And he did it. This was one of the most ridiculous things I saw last night. So he's worried about, and I have that clip if you want to watch it, danalash.com. I have everything up there that you could want to know about all of this stuff. So the reaction, and it wasn't just Jim Acosta that he was on with Chris Cuomo. And Chris Cuomo had his brother Andrew Cuomo on. So what was Cuomo? Literally, they had one Cuomo in one box and another Cuomo in the other box. So the president says, we're suspending travel, blah, blah, blah. He says all this stuff. Jim Acosta's like, well, it's, he said it was a foreign virus. Smacks is, that's where it started. For the same reason that we say, are you mental? Seriously, who hurt you? What is your damage? Just focus on the facts. No one's paying Jim Acosta for his opinions. Repeat the facts that other people tell you. It's just really simple. That wasn't the only one. Brian Stelter tweeted this. Quote, Trump's Oval Office address was exactly what his Fox wingman needed. Now Sean Hannity et al. Can celebrate the new travel ban while evading the real scourge of community spread within the U.S. Yes, because making sure that newer cases coming in from Europe, which is where a lot of the latest cases have originated, making sure that more don't enter means you also can't do anything about community spread. I like waffles. Why do you hate pancakes? That's literally that, right? I mean, it is exemplifies how nuance is dead. As journalists, you should be able to actually critically engage in thought better than that. Because you guys know I'm a serious germaphobe. That and I'm looking at, because apparently, so one of my cousins, her daughters, their university said, we're just for the rest of the spring, we're going to be doing online remote classes. And you have to let us know if you're coming back to your dorm and all this stuff. Like I mean, what? Anyway, so I had to go into a CVS yesterday, right? And I had to get a couple things. And I realized as I parked my car and I was getting out of my car that my germophobia kicked into a gear that has been unseen since the Ebola thing, when little Rachel over here was around the block from that one lady who like exploded outside. I don't know.
What?
I don't know.
Is that true?
I don't know. It's just terrifying disease.
Wow.
And I had to fly like the day after, and I legit rolled up to the airport with the mask on, and I didn't even have like, what is it, the N95 one with the Bane things on it. I got those now. And gloves and all that stuff, and people thought I was ridiculous, but I don't even care. So I'm sitting there in my car. I'm getting ready to get out at the CVS, right? And my germophobia kicks into gear. Like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. This is crazy. And I didn't have any like gloves or anything with me because I just hadn't been thinking about it, you know? I have like all the travel Purell that I use mad. So I don't know why I did this. I had 2 travel tissue packs. And I sat there in my car and made little mittens for my hands of these. And it required me basically pinching my fingers together to keep them on. And so I was like a seal or Zoidberg walking into CVS with my fin hands. And I needed to purchase items. And so I picked up a basket, and the poor college kid who was there at the checkout looked at me like I had 2 heads, and that's okay. And went in and I got my items and, was knocking them off the shelf into my basket with my fin tissue hand. And it was so awkward. And then one of the things I have to always look at is the as seen on TV aisle, because that fascinates me. It's like going to the zoo. And so I had to walk over there with my fin hands, and then there was one thing that I wanted, and that it was on a hook. And
it's not going to be good.
so I'm using my tissue paper covered fin hands to try to knock this thing off the hook into my basket. And the whole time I was thinking, man, I was so good at operation as a kid. You know, that thing when you had to like really like have a steady hand, and I was so good at that. And I'm like, it's time, Dana. All those skills honed throughout your childhood are being tested now. It all led up to this moment when you have tissue hands and you're trying to get items at CVS. So as I turn after I successfully spent a minute doing that and got my item knocked into the bin. And then I passed Cadbury eggs, and I had to knock those with my tissue hands into the bin. And then I turned around to go the other way, and there was a woman. I don't know how long she had been standing there watching me. And so I tell you this just in the event I want to get ahead of any video that comes out. Because she had her phone in her hand and her basket, and she was looking at me like I was a Martian. Like, what is your damage? And I didn't know what else to do. So I was holding the basket and I just waved at her with my toilet paper mitten. Then I went to check out. So see, I'm not like freaking out. It was just some common sense, right? So much easier with gloves. Anyway, so I get to the checkout and I'm like, well, let's see, how are we going to do this? And so they never give you enough room for your items at the self-checkout. It's like they discourage you from doing more items than like 3 at self-checkout. And the automated lady bot is very bossy. And so I put my basket with my tissue hands still. And I put my basket on the thing. And I am very carefully, like the claw, getting my items out and scanning them. And I had to like expose part of my knuckle on my finger because it was a stupid touch screen. Tissue hands ain't going to work on that. No, they're not. My nose is running. I'm laughing so hard. So, and again, I'm telling you this because the lady was there with her phone, and I don't know if she took any video, and I'm just getting ahead of it. So I'm like very carefully and deliberately like exposing a bit of knuckle to hit that touch screen and scanning my items. And I finally make it happen. And then at the very end, if you must know, one of them was a new lady razor. And then it didn't want to take it. It kept accusing me of not putting the item in the bag. And I'm like, great. And then it locked it, and it said a sales associate had to come and unlock it. And I'm like, I went to this stupid thing so I didn't look like a freak with my tissue hands, okay? And as I turned around to see if someone was coming, that woman was there, phone in hand. And I don't know, I'm positive she took a picture. I'm positive. She was like holding it like in the way that you would if you just took one and then put your hand down. And I'm just standing there. I don't know what else to do. And then the associate comes up, and God love him, it's that same teenager, and didn't say anything about my tissue hands. Was just like acted like it was a regular everyday event at CVS. And I was able to use my Apple Pay so I didn't have to touch anything else. And then after I did that and did because face recognition, hit the button and then dropped it into my purse just haphazardly. And I was able to scoop up my bags and head out. And then getting into the car was interesting because it's the thing where you got to press that. Yeah, that was fun. Oh, yeah. So my long story short, just some common sense and gloves. I don't know why Trump is getting so slammed over some of the response to this. Everyone realizes, right, that initially when this was first discussed, and I caught this from it was like a side remark that the guy at the CDC, when Trump went to Atlanta and was visiting the CDC, and he had that very entertaining press conference. And I think he was just trying to bring some levity to a bunch of stuffed shirts, right? Because people are just so like, oh, we're all going to die. And Trump's trying to just be like, you just chill the hell out. By the way, sidebar, those people always will never get out of any emergency situation. One of the smartest things that I ever heard came from Rudy Giuliani in the wake of 9/11. And he was asked while everything literally like buildings were collapsing and everything was on fire and it was totally insane. And he was described as being, I think the human body has a natural reaction when something needs to desperately get done. Some people get so focused in on it that that's all they can see. And everyone had said that that's how he was, just getting on the phone, strategizing, making sure this person had this, that this group had this, firefighters had this, and was just everywhere. Apparently, like, didn't sleep for 2 days. And he was asked about this several months after. And I forget who it was that asking him in the question. I don't know if it was like ABC or an NBC. And they said, how were you able, you're mayor, and you're seeing smoke come from your city. People are screaming, running through the streets, covered in ash. How are you able to keep a sound focus, realizing that you might be in danger too, keep a solid focus and get done what you need to get done? And he said, my father always told me that the calmest person in the room can figure their way out of every situation. And that always stayed with me. And I thought, So I think that's what needs to be applied here. there's a difference between sheer hysteria and common sense and remaining calm, because it does no good to anyone. This is how else you can look at it. This coronavirus and this particular mutation of it, COVID-19, which is a more dangerous strain, and the mutation happened because it was not contained. China didn't help out with anybody. They didn't help anybody out, any country out. They did the same thing with SARS, apparently. They withheld the gene sequencing for like 2 weeks so that our CDC, no one else, could actually get ahead of it and make sure that we were able to not just test, but also speed towards some sort of vaccination. And that was something that was brought up, as I said, when Trump went to visit Atlanta. And that one of the doctors said something that gave me pause, and I started looking into it. And that's why China got so mad at the United States. Because people here were accurately saying, you guys screwed up. You guys are such tyrants and you're such stupid communists that you endangered the entire world because you were so afraid at having to look like the impotent ruling class you are. This hysteria, I think, obscures some really serious discussions that we have to have. And I'm happy to finally see some of it being brought up. We touched on it a little bit last week when we were discussing pharmaceuticals and manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, which is odd that you have, a candidate, you have two candidates out there, Biden and Bernie, who are talking about how drug companies need to pay higher costs, et cetera, et cetera. Keep in mind that those drug companies are the same ones that are making the vaccinations for coronavirus. They're the same ones trying to discover ways in which to combat the antibiotic resistance that so many bacteria are developing because of misuse. So the Trump administration was discussing how in the United States we have relied so much, and I did not admittedly realize until I started reading into it a little bit when I was under the weather with the strep throat, how much we actually rely on China for not just, artificial sweeteners and things like that, but drugs, like prescription medication. I was genuinely shocked. And I thought, this is seriously cannot be like happening. The administration said that as a country, we are too dependent on China for vital medicines. But I don't know what all, and the big question is going to be what all can we do as a way to remedy that? Everybody has been too reliant upon cheap manufacturer outside of the country. And I'll tell you what, I do not mind. One of the reasons that the way it is the way it is because we obviously pay our workers more in the United States and we have unions for public sector and private sector, et cetera, right? I do not mind paying more for something that is in the supply chain that we can control and it is manufactured here in the United States. And I guarantee you that 99% of Americans feel the exact same way. Now, I realize that there are certain companies, and it's a more nuanced conversation than that. I fully acknowledge it. There are certain companies, especially a lot of startups, that to get their feet off the ground, startups that turn into successful businesses that employ a lot of the people who previously were looking for jobs, they rely on certain things from countries like China to reduce overhead. I feel like we need to explore better ways to make that happen here in the United States so we can have reasonable pricing. We are making sure people are getting paid according to their work, because in China, they pay like nothing and no protections, even environmental concerns or anything. Obviously, we have those protections and concerns here in the United States. There has to be a way to balance it. I know there is. And I think that's what Washington needs to focus on. So this is what they've been looking at. And this was part of the economic response, the White House response to deal with the economics of this COVID-19 fallout. And the New York Times had a piece getting into some of it and discussing how trade advisor Peter Navarro This is a push from him where they're discussing how federal agencies, they want to tighten Buy American laws for federal agencies. And by federal agencies, that's you, the taxpayer. That's me, the taxpayer. It's all of us, the taxpayer. So whenever you hear federal agencies, realize that bill comes due to us. It's important to keep all this out there. Are we serious about making it work? I think I'd like to be. So Navarro is talking about taxpayer-funded federal agencies requiring them to purchase American-made pharmaceuticals, medical equipment, etc. A quick aside, you know how many times I've heard, and I know you all have heard this too, where people are like, oh, the government's picking up the bill. Let's, gouge them, right? Yeah, that's us. We're the government. We pay them. That's our money. The government just shrugs and hands the bill to us, right? The administration has been working on an executive order, and apparently they're going to release this in the next few days. And we only know a few things that are in this thus far. I don't know what, I hate the phrase loopholes. There's either something's illegal or not, right? They want the government to purchase everything like ventilators, face masks, pharmaceuticals, which can be a very generic term. Everything from that, they want that to be American made, American manufactured. And they also, and this is what the hope is that their demand, the government consumption of American-made drugs and American-made medical products will provide an incentive for these companies to make these products here in the United States rather than China. Now, the New York Times notes that in order to facilitate this kind of production, they want streamlined regulatory approvals for American-made products. They want more detailed labeling on the origins of products that are not made in the United States. And Peter Navarro, when he was giving an interview, he discussed how China was dominating all aspects of the supply chain. And that's true. I mean, when you use cheap sweatshop labor, when you are basically keeping your citizenry as indentured servants to produce things that the government and communist class benefit from, yeah, I mean, that's what makes them affordable. There is still a price. It may not be money, but there is a price. All for that. So Bernie Sanders just basically turned into a giant middle finger to James Carville and to Joe Biden and to all the people who were calling for unity. His speech, though, sounded kind of like like a concession speech, sort of. Didn't it? I think he wants to bend the party over a barrel. I'm here for this. I'm here. I'm totally all about it. I mean, this is great. I was reading Savage Son by Jack Carr while I was like down and out and under the weather. Now I think I'm going to watch this when I'm not looking at that. I'm just going to watch this massive slap fight. He's not done. He is good. This is the revenge campaign. Bernie Sanders now has zero interest in actually winning voters. Bernie Sanders wants to drive a stake into the heart of Joe Biden. And all of the people in the Democrat Party who he thinks picked on him because he's a crazy, all out in your face socialist, and they're hiding their socialism in the closet. So this is not, and he goes, well, we're currently losing the delegate count. I mean, you're not just losing the delegate count, you're getting your butt kicked optically. You're losing in like all of the places, man. You can't even win it on messaging right now. Did you see the town hall? And we're going to talk about this coming up, but I got to play this now. Did you see the town hall where he was asked about socialism and he fell all over God's green earth trying to answer this one question that you think that he would be prepared for? Like if you're going to participate in a network town hall and someone's asking you about socialism and how does it differ from, the Nordic socialism that you always talk about, and he just falls all over himself. He doesn't actually answer. He doesn't answer it. Then he says something incorrect about it. Well, listen.
Senator, let me follow up on that, if I may. Basically, since the 90s, if you look at examples in Sweden and Denmark, they have been lowering or cutting property taxes, lowering corporate taxes, allowing vouchers for schools, for public schools and private schools, which is one of the reasons why their education has improved. The founder of IKEA, who famously came back, left his home country, moved here, has now gone back because he says the tax environment for him is getting better. So they appear to be moving away more towards market reform and not towards what you're describing you'd like to see here.
All right, but if you, and I'm not an expert on the current economy in Sweden, but disagree with me if you want. Does Sweden guarantee health care to all people as a human right?
Yeah, but they're finding other ways to pay for it.
Yeah, they've actually been incorporating capitalist policies, and the success that those capitalist policies have brought to the country, Bernie Sanders interprets that as, well, that's a victory for socialism. I mean, I'm not an expert on their economy that I literally use all the time on the campaign trail to talk about my economic plans. I'm not an expert on the thing I always compare it to. Grief. Because one of the things that Steve Mnuchin is saying is that, it's not a bailout, but it kind of is. It's a bailout. But at what point do we say, okay, government needs to step in, and is that a limited government view to have, right? And I think that there is a very fine line there. There's a fine line in that. And so I was looking at just some of the proposals, and like with the House, their bill, I hope that the Senate seriously considers the way that it is and the stuff that they have on there. It just needs to be straight focusing on the necessities as it relates to the coronavirus. We don't need anything else. We don't need a bunch of other things at this moment. Just stop with the politicizing stuff and the discretionary. Just stop. So the House bill, and here's a couple of things in it, because they say that they're all about combating coronavirus. But the appropriations bill, Pelosi in her presser said the way that she pitched it was it's families first and et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be tens of billions of dollars. I mean, the food is like a $1 billion. Unemployment benefits are about $1 billion. And the government mandated paid sick leave program that they have, and this is the way it is written right now, is permanent. It's not a temporary thing. It's a permanent thing. That's what's in the bill that the House passed to the Senate. And then there is an additional 14 days of required paid sick leave if there's like a public health emergency, and taxpayer, we pay the bill. And there's only one provision of the paid sick leave that actually deals with coronavirus. And that is a federal program that it creates an entirely brand new federal program that is reimbursed through Social Security. And it pays those who contract, who end up with the coronavirus, and the people who are caring for them. And it gives them 2/3 of their wages. Yeah. Now, none of this stuff is going to be set up overnight. You're talking a long time to implement stuff like this. This is not putting families first. This is transitioning into some AOC type stuff, using this as the excuse to do it. So that's where this is where this is where I'm concerned. And then of course they're going to say, well, if Republicans don't want to pass this, then they must not care. Okay, everybody calm down. First off, no. And stop politicizing it. That's all there is to it. This country, first off, they were arresting doctors who were trying to warn people of what was going on. They were arresting them. Remember, we had that as a headline, remember? That was an actual headline. And there were a number of them who were trying to warn the people that, hey, there's this virus. It's highly, highly, highly contagious. And they're trying to warn people. For one, LA Times had a good piece, Business Insider, MSN, AP, name it. There were a number of doctors that they arrested. One of them was a doctor who died of it. This doctor, Dr. Li Wenliang, was sending warnings, according to LA Times, of a deadly virus on social media. He was warning people, this is a coronavirus. It is mutating. It's going to be incredibly difficult to contain. We got to get ahead of it. And he was tweeting about it. And then the Chinese government, he was getting it on social media as best he could. China doesn't necessarily have Twitter. And the Chinese government was trying to downplay it but the doctor kept insisting that they tell the truth. So they arrested him. He was a folk hero. They arrested him and 7 others for what they called spreading rumors. And this was in January that they arrested him. And then shortly after, everything that we saw happen in Wuhan was taking place. And he did an interview with a Chinese publication, and he was in quarantine. And he said, I don't care if I'm vindicated or not. It's important people know the truth. And he died in February in a hospital in Wuhan because he'd been treating people as well. And early reports of his death were retracted. And he left behind a wife and child, and a number of other doctors, not several, a number, were also arrested. And they lied about their numbers initially. China lied about them. They were trying to hide and trying to downplay the number of fatalities. And then when they started actually having to report the number of fatalities, it increased 70-fold, something insane. They also, in addition to that, they not only were arresting doctors, they were lying about their numbers. They were all of this. They also refused to share, and I have a piece on this. They were refusing to share the genome sequencing. And it was for 14 days, they refused to share any results of this. And there were all of these state-owned Chinese media outlets began just echoing what Beijing was telling everyone to say. And I mean, Beijing lied they lied for a month and a half about human-to-human transmission, about the existence of it. They were lying and downplaying that. They refused to admit it. Now, if you're all these other countries and you're going off of reports of what you're hearing and you're trying to get your countries prepared, how do you think that bodes for all these people that are getting mad at the United States or getting mad at these other? You realize that it started here and they were refusing to share any data. So that's why we're all behind. Don't sit here and be like, well, it's because the CDC didn't have money. Really? Because the CDC, they're so underfunded. I retweeted one great point. They had to divert resources away from pandemic detection and prevention to express concern about stigma and miscounting gun injuries and playing into gun control. Whatever. Don't even play me with that. So there were a number of Chinese journalists that were also arrested for reporting the truth. There were, there's so much of it. And the genome sequencing, they would not share, they withheld it for 14 days. That's the estimation of they think that it actually may have been longer, that they'd actually discovered it earlier. In fact, there is one of the publications that they have in China, which is an economic and finance news site. And it was the only one that was resisting, called Kaikshin. It was resisting, and I butchered that name, the efforts of Beijing to control their content. And so they were continuing with investigative reports. And when the COVID stuff really started swelling up, they focused more and more on that. And they were resisting the propaganda department in Beijing. And there was a Chinese pulmonologist, Dr. Zhong Nishan, who confirmed human-to-human transmission, and they aired it on China Central Television on January 20th. And then they came for him. And then the Caixin, the newspaper, or the economic and finance publication, they interviewed a microbiologist in Hong Kong who said that the scale of the outbreak could be 10 times bigger than SARS. But everyone ignored it because the majority of the media outlets, in fact, pretty much every single one but 2, followed Beijing's instructions to refuse airing any of this information, refuse sharing it, refuse reporting on it. And they said, well, we don't want to create a social panic. But they didn't do anything about it. So then one of the last investigations that they had on February 26th, they found out that 9 samples collected from patients with unexplained viral pneumonia had been sent to multiple labs for testing as early as December 2019. Upon interviewing a number of medical doctors who were in charge of treating patients at the very initial stage of the outbreak, the Caixin journalist obtained a list of labs which had helped the hospitals to run analysis of the new virus. And this comes from a couple of different locations, including a Hong Kong publication. The journalists, they obtained all these labs were working with these hospitals. And upon the testing, there was one lab that found out that the genome sequence of the new virus was 87% similar to bat SARS, like the coronavirus. The lab shared the results with the China Institute of Pathogen Biology and the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention on December 27th. But the National Health Commission issued a regulation banning all labs from sharing and releasing their test results. They did this in the first couple of days in January. China only allowed the release of the genome sequence of COVID-19 to the World Health Authority, WHO. That was on January 11th, 2 weeks after they got a hold of the result. Now, sidebar, we had a headline around that time talking about how the World Health Organization had asked China to release any data related to sequencing on this so that people could start to work on a vaccination and also map it better so that they could get a better understanding as to how it was going to spread, right? So we had that headline. Now it's all coming together. So they finally allowed the release only to the World Health Organization, a subsidiary of the UN, and then Cation had a report so explosive, it showed that Beijing had withheld very significant public health information for 14 days. The genome sequence, for those who don't know, and this publication also explains, it's essential not only in the production of diagnostic testing, but also in tracking the origin of the virus to prevent any outbreaks in the future. They removed it online. Beijing removed that publication's report of this online. They removed it. But the internet never forgets. And there were some Chinese internet denizens that saved it, and they got a PDF of it, and they saved it and they put it up online in multiple different places to where Beijing couldn't get all of it. So Cation's investigation into this was just erased step by step by Beijing. And they also questioned the data of the confirmed infection rate. Remember how it was originally, they showed that China's numbers were really small and everyone's like, oh, well, it seems like we could contain this. And then I think it was towards end of, I think it was maybe beginning of February. That's when their numbers like jumped. Well, they had been lying about it. Cation had an investigation showing that they were lying about the number of infected, and that was taken offline. They showed that the death toll that Cation reported was also censored. And again, there are some super brave. You want to talk about brave journalists? I know like Acosta thinks he's one. The brave journalists are the ones that are in China that are risking their lives, getting this information, sharing it with each other, and putting it in so many places online across the world that Beijing can't erase it all because they want to save lives. Beijing wants to save face. So that report, the death toll, the original death toll was also removed. And then there was a doctor from one of the hospitals in Wuhan that was apparently like at the like zero right there. And he told the Cation publication that out of 120 fever patients, meaning patients that were demonstrating the high fever, it's one of the symptoms of COVID, that they received on a single day, 80 of them had pneumonia. Only 5 were admitted. The rest were told to self-quarantine at home. Cation's reporters interviewed a dozen families who shared that their relatives had also died of unexplained pneumonia before the COVID testing became a procedure. So China wasn't even testing. They know that the earliest emergence of this was in November, but what the reports from Cation are suggesting is that it even predates that. And it was going on for so long, and Beijing just was like, no, we don't need to test. That's huge. Whenever you hear the curve, does everybody understand what the whole flatten the curve means? So we just got an email too from our pastor, because now our church services are all going to be streamed into homes. So our homes are going to be our churches now for the time being. Flattening the curve. When we discuss this, what we're doing is not. There's 2 ways to look at it. Most everyone, a lot of people are going to come in contact with this. And a lot of people will contract it. That's not a death sentence. It means that depending on your age group and and how healthy you are, you might honestly think that you have a cold. You might have a little worse than a cold. You might have a headache. Everyone does have a fever. I want to point that out. The mild cases will have a high fever, but the symptoms aren't worse than like a very bad cold. Like a bad cold. That's pretty much it. And the more severe cases, that's when your lungs start producing liquid. And then older, that's when, and so it's those serious and then there's like 4 levels that they have classified, levels of infection. And the last 2 are the ones that are eligible for hospitalization. Now, when they're talking about flattening the curve, everyone, like I said, is going to be exposed to it, or not everyone, but majority of people will probably end up contracting it in some way or form. I don't know the numbers because I'm just telling you as a way to assuage any fears. Like I said, it is not a death sentence. What the government is trying to do is make it to where if the majority of people are going to end up getting this, then let's have, and this is going to sound odd how I say it. I don't have any other better way to put it. Let's take turns. You know what I mean? Because then if everyone gets sick at once, that's the spike. That will overwhelm our resources. We don't have enough hospital beds. There's just no country can deal with that. Nobody can deal with that. And that's when you actually may see greater loss of life for those, as I just gave you the stats, the more advanced and aged, or the ones with compromised immune systems. That's where you will see, because so many people needing help will mean that there will have to be instances where people go without help. So flattening the curve means instead of the spike, instead of it peaking up, flattening it down and spreading the contraction rate over a greater period of time so that resources can adequately handle, they can treat, and people can better recover and even more quickly recover. And serious cases don't have to be statistics of fatalities, because we will have been able to better anticipate and have better spread out that contraction rate so that everyone who is severe can get the care that they need. That's what we're talking about.